In this video, I'm going to teach you how to factor this trinomial 8x squared minus 10x plus 3 with the leading coefficient greater than 1 and I'm going to show you how to factor this using the slip and slide method. Okay, now I have a video on how to factor similar trinomial using the AC method, and you can find the video on my channel. Now we have a procedure of how to factor this using the slip and slide method, and here it is. Here's the procedure. So it has 4 steps. Step 1 is to slip A to the end of the trinomial and multiply by C. So your A is a positive 8, so we're going to slip this, okay, to the end of it, and we're going to times it by C. 8 times 3. Okay, so you're left with x squared, take away 10x, and then plus 24. So now it becomes a basic trinomial where the leading coefficient is 1. So factoring x squared minus 10x plus 24 is a lot easier than factoring the ax squared minus 10x plus 3. Step 2 is to factor this new basic trinomial. So we're going to go ahead and factor this. So we have to bring in the c. So your c is 24 because it's ax squared, take away bx, plus c. So c is 24. Now we have to come up with factors of 24 that when you add it up, you get b to be negative 10. So b is negative 10 and then c is 24. So let's think of those two numbers. Factors of 24. Okay, we're going to need two negative numbers because negative times negative is positive, and then negative plus negative stays negative. So can you think of the two factors? How about we try negative 6 and negative 4. Let's see. Negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24. Negative 6 plus negative 4, well, that comes out to negative 10. So we have the same thing. We got to use those two numbers and write it out in factor form. So it's going to be x minus 6 times x minus 4. Okay, so that's step number 2. Step 3 is to divide both your factors by the value you slip over in step 1. So we're going to divide the factor by the a that we slip over in step 1. So we're going to divide this by 8, and we're going to divide this by 8. So that's step number 3. Step number 4 is to reduce fractions and then slide any denominators up next to the variable. So common factor would be greatest common factor. You can divide by 2. So if you divide 6 by 2, you get 3. If you divide 8 by 2, you get 4. Okay, and then over here you have 4 over 8. Well, 4 over 8 is the same as 1/2. So you turn it into 1/2. And now we're going to bring the denominator. Okay, so denominator is going to go out in front of the variable. So here it becomes 4x, take away 3, And then here the 2 will go in front of the x. So you have 2x minus 1. Now you can always check it to see if these two factors are right by multiplying these two binomials. Okay, so if it's right, it's going to come back to this. Let's take a look at another trinomial where the leading coefficient is greater than 1. So here we have 9x squared plus 3x minus 2. And we're going to factor this using the slip and slide method. And we have a procedure of how to do that. And here's the procedure. So step number 1. Step 1, we have to slip a to the end of the trinomial and then multiply that by c. So your a is 9, so we're going to slip that to the end and then we're going to multiply by c. So the x squared stay, and then we bring down the 3x. And then 9 times negative 2 is negative 18. Okay, so what we did is we slipped the 9 to the end and we multiply with c, and that gives us negative 18. Okay, so that's step number 1. Step 2 is to factor this new basic trinomial. So by moving the 9 over, if you look at this, 9x squared plus 3x minus 2, and then the x squared plus 3x minus 18. So the x squared plus 3x minus 18 is a lot easier to factor. So we're going to factor this basic trinomial. So first thing we have to do is to bring in the c. Well, we have to identify what c is. What is c? Well, c is negative 18. Because here's your c. It's negative 18. So now we have to come up with factors of negative 18, two numbers that multiply to get negative 18. But when you add the two numbers, it comes out to what b is. And if you go back and look at the trinomial, your b is 3. So we have to find two numbers, multiply to get negative 18. And then when we add those two numbers up, it comes out to positive 3. So let's think about that for a minute. Basically here you would have to guess the two numbers and then check it. If you're lucky, you get it right the first time. So let's come up with the two numbers here. Factors of 18. Well, let's work with 6 and 3. See if that works. 6 times 3 is positive 18. So one of these numbers has to be a negative number. Well, because we need it to end on a positive 3, we need this to be a negative number. And then we add these two numbers up. It comes out to positive 3. And hey, look at that. That's what we're looking for. So these are the two numbers that we're looking for, the two factors. So what do we do with those two factors? Well, we're going to use those two numbers, and we would write that in factor form. So that's going to be x plus 6, because positive 6 was one of the factor, and then x minus 3. So if I were to factor this right here, x squared plus 3x minus 18, I'm done. I'm all done. But no, but the original is 9x squared plus 3x minus 2, so I have to keep on going. Step number 3 is to divide both your factors by the value you slip over in step 1. So what did we slip in step 1? Well, we slip over the a, which is the 9, so we're going to have to divide 6 by 9. And then we have to divide negative 3 by 9. Okay, so step 3 is really easy. And then step 4 is to reduce the fractions and then slide any denominators up next to the variable. So let's see what happened here. 6 over 9, we can easily reduce that to reduce by 3. So if you divide 6 by 3, you get 2. You divide 9 by 3, you get 3. So 6 over 9 is the same as 2 over 3. And then 3 over 9 is the same as 1 over 3. Okay, so we reduce it. So after we reduce the fractions, we're going to slide any denominators up next to the variable. So here's your denominator, the 3 is your denominator, we're going to slide that up here to the variable. So this becomes 3x plus 2, and that's one of the factor of the original trinomial. And then here, the denominator is 3, so we're going to bring that to the front. So we get 3x minus 1. All right, so there we have it, and we can always check this. Okay, we multiply these two binomials. If they're right, if these are the two factors of the original trinomial, it needs to come out to 9x squared plus 3. Let's take a look at one more. Here's a trinomial. We have 10x squared minus x minus 2. Okay, and it's a trinomial where the leading coefficient is greater than 1. Okay, now we can use the AC method or the slip and slide method, but in this lesson I'm going to show you how to use slip and slide, and we have a procedure of how to do that. So here it is. Step number 1 is to slip a to the end of the trinomial and then multiply that by c. So we're going to slip a, so your a is 10, and that's going to go to the end of the trinomial, and then we're going to times that by c. C is negative 2. Okay, so the x squared stays the same, minus x, and then when we do that, when we slip the 10 over, we get negative 20. So now factoring x squared minus x minus 20 is a lot easier than the original. Okay, because now here your leading coefficient is 1, so it's a lot easier. And I also have a video on how to do this using the procedure. Okay, so that's step number 1. Step 2, what are we doing for step 2? Well, step 2, we're going to factor this basic trinomial. So we're going to list c is negative 20. Now we have to come up with factors of negative 20. Two numbers that multiply to get negative 20. But when you add up those two numbers, it comes out to negative 1. Okay, so factors of 20, 5 and 4 would be the closest to it, but one of them has to be a negative number. So let's take 5 times 4. And we need this to be negative 5. We need the 5 to be negative because you got to add this and make it come out to negative 1. So here you have it. Okay, that's what we need. The two numbers is negative 5 and positive 4. So what we do with those two numbers is we're going to use those two numbers and we're going to write it in factor form. So we have x take away 5 times x plus 4. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3 is to divide both your factors by the value you slip over in step 1. So what did we move over in step 1? We moved the 10 over to multiply with the negative 2. So now we're going to have to go back and divide these factors by 10. So negative 5 over 10, and then 4 over 10. And then after you divide, you are going to reduce. So we're moving on to step 4. Step 4 is to reduce the fraction. So you got x minus, well, 5 over 10 is the same as 1/2. Okay, you reduce by 5. And then here, 4 over 10. Greatest common factor is 2, so you divide this by 2, and then you divide this by 2. Okay, so you're left with x plus 2 over 5. Okay, so to finish this up, after you reduce, you are going to take the denominator and move it to the front with the variable. So that means when you move the 2 over, you get 2x minus 1. Okay, that's one of the factor. And then the 5 goes in front of the x, so you get a 5x plus 2. Okay, and we're done. And you can check it to make sure these two factors are the correct factor by multiplying the two binomials. Okay, let's take a look at one more. Let's look at the trinomial of 6x squared plus 9x minus 27. Okay, so this is another trinomial where the leading coefficient of x squared is greater than 1. You have a 6. And we're going to factor this using the slip and slide method. Okay, so, and we have a procedure of how to do it. So let's take a look at the procedure. So here it is. So here it is. Actually, before we follow the procedure step by step, if you look at this trinomial, okay, I don't know if you noticed that you can actually pull a number out, because 6, 9, and 27, they have a greatest common factor other than 1. So you can pull out a number to bring it down a little smaller in terms of their coefficient. So can you think of that? Greatest common factor, the biggest number that can go into 6, 9, and 27. Well, if you thought of 3, you're right. So we can pull a 3 out. So if you pull a 3 out, you're left with 2x squared, because 3 times 2x squared is 6x squared. And then 3 times what number is 9x? That's going to be 3x. And then 3 times what give you 27? And that's going to be 9. So as you can see, we pull a 3 out. We're able to bring down the coefficient a lot smaller than the original coefficients. Okay, so we're going to work with the 2x squared plus 3x minus 9. All right, so step number 1 is to slip a to the end of the trinomial and multiply that by c. So we're going to move this to the end, and we're going to times it by c. So that's going to give us x squared plus 3x, take away 2 times negative 9 is 18, negative 18. Okay, so we're able to bring down from a trinomial with the leading coefficient greater than 1 to where the leading coefficient is 1. So it's a lot easier to factor the one we have down here. Okay, so we're going to move on to step 2. Step 2 is factor this new basic trinomial. So we're going to list the c, write down what c is. C is negative 18. And here's your c, negative 18. So now we have to come up with two numbers that when we multiply, we get negative 18. But when we add those two numbers, comes out to what b is, and that's positive 3. All right, let's think about this. Negative 18, factors of negative 18. How about we try 6 and 3? Okay, so one of these numbers has to be a negative number. since we want it to end up with positive 3, we need the 3 to be a negative number. So now we have 6 plus negative 3. Well, that's just going to come out to 3, and then that's what we needed to happen. Okay, so these are the two numbers. All right, so what do we do with those two numbers? Well, we're going to use those two numbers, and we're going to write it out in factor form. So we leave the 3 alone, and then we turn the x squared plus 3x minus 18 into x plus 6 times x minus 3. And that is step number 2. Now let's move on to step 3. Step 3, we have to divide both of the factors by the value that we slipped over in step 1. So what did we move over in step 1? We move over the 2. So what we need to do is we need to divide the factors by 2. So one of the factors is 6. So we divide 6 by 2. And then we divide negative 3 by 2. And then we reduce it. So it looks like 2 goes into 6 3 times. So we'll leave this 3 alone here. So here x plus 2 goes into 6 3 times. And then 3 over 2 cannot be reduced. So therefore, we're just going to bring the 2 to the front. So when we bring the 2 to the front, we get 2x minus 3. So we have 3 factors. The 3 is one of the factors, and then the other 2. So now you can always check this, make sure those factors are right. And if you multiply all these 3 factors, this is what you have to get to know it's right. All right, so that's all I have for you in this video. I want to thank you for watching this video. Now, if you find these helpful, please click the like button below and subscribe. I thank you so much.